views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Too many times we see incidents that are, at least to say, racially motivated. Some of these incidents gain popular attention, like the White House staffer, who's reported to be a burglar as he moved into his apartment on the Upper West Side, or the arrest of two men at a Philadelphia Starbucks as they were waiting for a business meeting, only being in Starbucks for 2 minutes. On this episode of Perspectives, we discuss some of the recent racial incidents, what to make of it, and what we can understand. That's coming up on Perspectives with yours truly, Daren Jaime.
Let 'em know. What's on your mind? Let 'em know. Anything relevant to life, you bring it to the table. Whether you make a move solo or a movement with a stable. No fables, you speak on your decisions. Cause in the long run, it's your voice, your views, your vision. Keeping it real with many messages for you to know. This ain't radio, but DJ runs the show. Entertainment, he rocks it. Politics, he locks it. The host with the most would handle any topic. Don't forget to share your perspective with shines of light. Cause it might make a difference in someone else's life.
Make a difference.
What's your perspective?
Express what's in your heart and your mind. Share your perspective.
What's your perspective?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Perspectives. I am Daren Jaime, and of course, we invite you to stay connected to Perspectives. We air every week here on BronxNet's Channel 67. And then also, you can check us out on our social media pages, Facebook, and also Twitter, and then Instagram. You can also get me on my professional page, Daren C. Jaime, and find out some inspiration, and hopefully you can get another perspective. Well, if you see something, say something. There have been so many incidents in recent memories where residents have reported suspicious activities to help law enforcement officers foil potential plots for crimes. But there are also examples of citizens who saw something but didn't say anything, like the San Bernardino couple who killed 14 people, injured 22 others in 2016. One neighbor reportedly didn't report them for fear of racial profiling. So, where do we draw that thin, blurred line with the racial undertone that is so prevalent in our American society? Here now to weigh on this topic, my good friend Joyce Johnson. She's worked on the Obama for America campaign hire in 2007. She's also a community leader with corporate and government experience. She's made runs for a public office, including a congressional bid in 2010 and 2012, and she's also a key political contributor right here on Perspectives. And Joyce, good to have you.
Great to see you.
Good.
Great to see you.
As we talk about this, obviously, incidents come on week after week. And one of the things I've heard, and I think maybe it was Will Smith that said it best, when it talked about racial profiling, issues of police brutality, things that involve communities of color, and this injustice is, they said, it's not that it hasn't been going on, it's just now being filmed.
Thank God for the video. I was going to thank God for the video because God knows in 315 million people, 14% of which are African Americans and other people of color, I mean, you know, this is probably the tip of the iceberg. But so thank God for this because it gives rise to in the age of Trump. Because if we didn't have the video, these things would be going on in all communities throughout the country, unabated, unknown, you know, doing evil things, you know, untoward to folks who are doing nothing. And that begins a pattern and practice, and it reminds us, we weren't there, reminds us how post-Civil War, post-Reconstruction, how, you know, the KKK formed, and blacks were lynched and harmed and beaten. All of this was you know, it's history now. It's history now. But pattern and practice became typical performance and attitudes and response to black folks. Thank God for the video because we've got to stop this. In the age of Trump, this could be one more round, and we can't afford that one more round. But the most troubling thing is that, you know, in the face of this, what's the recourse? We don't have a Justice Department. There is a pattern and practice around the country. People can't go and report this. We are finding out because of the video, but it's happening. And there should be some entity, the Justice Department, but under Jeff Sessions and under Donald Trump, That Justice Department is no friend of ours.
Well, let's talk about this for a minute, because when we talk about the Justice Department, you talk about civil rights. When President Trump was elected into office, the first thing that disappeared off of the White House website were two things. It was first it was civil rights, and then it was also global warming. These things were actually the first things that were taken off of the civil rights agenda, only to hear later on from the White House that when it comes to these issues, that it would be referred to local government and it would be referred to as a local matter, which is code for what?
Which is code for we aren't doing anything. The reason why pattern and practice becomes national. And so, you know, you've got, how many local governments are there? 50,000. So we've got to go and petition local government when the United States, when the government, the national government has a responsibility in this, as they did with equal employment opportunity laws, as they did with worker rights, as they did with pro-choice, as they did with all of this stuff. That's what we're paying our taxes for. And so we're not getting our tax worth, but we knew it was not going to happen. So the drop back, as I'm watching these incidents and everybody's saying, and have a big presence on Facebook, and everyone says, boy, one more time, one more time. I'm looking to get past the one more time to what we can do about it, because it's certain that we don't have any support from the national government in the midst of this wave of bias-related police incidents calls, which is a manner of speaking, is harassment, number one. And two, it is taking resources from local police collectively. They could be doing real crime, you know, real enforcement, and not just responding to the whim of someone who thinks, you know, you can't walk while black, talk while black, sit in Starbucks while black, you can't golf while black. I mean, that was a particular one for me as a golfer.
With the young ladies who we know that were golfing and are supposedly going not as fast, not playing at the place of play, and yet still being asked to leave the golf course.
Asked to leave the golf course, but here as a golfer, I don't know whether you are as a golfer, that's for the golf course, because this happens all the time. The courtesy is if you're not playing as fast, and they refuted that. They said, wait a minute, the guys in front of us aren't playing, so you can only play as fast as the person in front of you. You know, the people who were offended didn't go to the folks who were in front of the ladies. They came to them and said. But the courtesy is that the golf courses have spotters and whatever that check this stuff regularly and say, look, do you mind? And nobody ever minds. You know, if I'm, you know, with a group just having a good time and playing a little slow, you either speed up or you say, sure, go ahead of me. But the police were called. So I mean, all of this is everybody's abandoning their responsibility. But what we're not doing, and I say we, not the offended, I'm looking for them to end up in the face of no Justice Department, in the face of, you know, we're on our own. I'm looking for local NAACP or, you know, organizations or units or whatever. The sororities and fraternities to take out. I'm looking for our local elected officials. You don't have to be in a black community if the adjacent offense is happening in a congressional district of your colleague. I mean, all of this is we have got to find the way to confront this, because it's going to become a pattern and practice. We're hunkering down to where it becomes commonplace. Nobody responds to it. And I don't want to get back to that place where someone could tell me that you can't eat here, you can't talk here, you better not look me in the eye, or else you're going to get shot and killed and murdered and lynched and all of that. Now that sounds somewhat hysterical, but we were there before, and we've got a president who could care less, and we've got, I'll say, some good percentage of the population that's right with it and willing to roll with it.
Joyce Johnson, our guest in the studio, talking about racial profiling in America. Coming up, how does today compare to the 60s? That question when we return.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't change, even if I tried, even if I wanted to. My love, she keeps me warm.
We are neighbors and best friends.
I love my sister.
My heart doesn't see race. Love is love.
Our family is no less than any other family.
Behold the angry giant. Behold the angry giant. Behold the angry giant. Behold the angry giant.
It only takes a moment to make a moment. Take time to be a dad today.
And we're back here on Perspectives, continue our conversation with Joyce Johnson, talking about profiling in America today. Recent incidents that have really rocked the core of communities. Taking a look at what we've seen, videotape of the Waffle House, 2 young men arrested in Starbucks, only after being in Starbucks for 2 minutes. 2 minutes before police were called. And subsequently, Starbucks says that they will be having, at the end of May, a national day of training where they're going to shut down and do training.
But God bless him. But you know, that Starbucks, that's one company. Think of all the convenience stores where this may happening. Think of all the golf course where this may be. Think of all the dorms, as in Harvard, where this could be. So, you know, give credit. So the point of it is, since we are the victims, what can we do? Mm-hmm. What can we do? I mean, the police have to respond. But for me, I said, let someone call the police on me for just being black, doing whatever, and I'm going to file a counter charge of harassment, because if you are being white and with whatever, I can be black with no harm, no motives, no precipitation, no valid reason to whatever. That's an harassment charge. So I suggest that anybody, you know, call the police, or that very same police are here saying, I want to file a charge against this person for harassment.
I think one of the more graphic videos we ever saw was a 65-year-old senior citizen woman who was actually arrested for a traffic violation.
She refused to sign the whatever, and the policeman grabbed her out of it and used profanity to a 65-year-old.
And snatched her up pretty good.
And snatched her up pretty good, and there have been no consequence.
Well, he has subsequently...
Oh, no, he resigned.
Right, he resigned.
He resigned saying that he resigned just to whatever, but he thought that he was right by his training. So I want to remind everybody, and here's where we're, you know, you have folks who are using the police, and you have arguably police who are very infiltrated with, you know, the FBI did studies years ago, the infiltration of KKK, white supremacists, and sympathizers within law enforcement. So these guys who can willingly, I mean, do you think he would have pulled his own grandmother or mother and choked her or grabbed her up or said F whatever? Or the folks who've been, you know, choking? I mean, there's nothing in police training that says you choke your person into submission. No. And so I'm, you know, again, the Justice Department, you know, all of this, it falls upon us because we've got bad actors. I love police, but if the FBI said years ago, and in the advent of Trump, they're more and more, you know, I'm believing, not infiltrated, they're working in law enforcement, and they can do things like this without any consequences.
So I started the segment off by asking the question, or I went to the break talking about the question about the 1960s. This is no stranger when we talk about racial profiling, injustice, you know, segregation, police brutality, allegations of misconduct. Mm-hmm. This is nothing far removed from what we saw in the 60s.
That's right.
But yet, until the 60s, there was a different kind of response and an ability to overcome. What is it going to take, looking at the 60s compared to now, for us to get the desired result that we need in this generation?
That's a very good question, because I'm a child of the 60s, sort of. I mean, you know, just a little bit younger than on the ground, but I certainly watched it and felt that rage of injustice and all of that, and wished that had I not grown up in Poughkeepsie, New York, that I could have gone south to be a part of the real movement. So what is it going to take? And that's my worry. And that talks about where we are. Because what I'm hearing, you always hear me fired up. I said to you, you let somebody make a call on me, and I'm going to file a charge of harassment. I'm going to take it as far as I can go. I'm not hearing that, so I'm waiting for, on Facebook, we're sharing and everybody's, talking about it. But we've got to do more than just talk about it. Can't be the 1% who are always fired up. But we have got to, the same way civil rights workers, the same way the kids who were in Greensboro sat down at the counter, the same way there was the Montgomery boycott, hit them where it hurts. In the resources, these are our in this case, these are our tax dollars being wasted. I'd go to town councils to say, in incidents, start going to town councils to say, have you been, are these things being reported here? And what are we going to do or what are we going to do about it? Well, our elected officials have to step up as well. Mm-hmm. And we've got folks on MSNBC, all of these things. It's being talked around, bubbling around, talking. But I'm for, what is the action?
Is the action led by those of us who would be considered seasoned, or do we see the rise really coming out of that millennial generation? Because when you think about Dr. King, and you think about Dr. King and John Lewis, they were in their early 30s. Yeah. They would be considered John Lewis and Dr. Martin Luther King would be considered a millennial generation.
Exactly.
Are we awaiting the rising of a millennial generation to say
well,
enough
we
is
saw
enough?
that in Parkland. So here's the point. The response from the kids in Parkland regarding the assault weapons and ban and the rabidness with which and they're organizing and all of that. So these are millennials. So I'm looking for our counter to, yes, indeed, our millennials. It should not be me who was sort of that generation of the 60s. It is me, and I'm ready, I'm fired up. But I'm waiting for them to get more, beyond, not beyond, sick and tired of being sick and tired, because it's going to become pervasive, and then it's become part of the culture. And when it becomes a part of the culture, particularly in this environment, then we are underclass once more, and brutally once more. It's one thing to report. We're seeing chokings, we're seeing beatings and grabbing. It's getting more outrageous, with no consequences. Not to even count those, how many have been killed, shot. You're going to the grandmother's house with a cell phone, shot in the back, and we're not hearing anything. It's becoming pervasive and consequential.
Take a quick break, talk more with Joyce Johnson. When we return, we'll talk more about the issue of racial profiling right here on Perspectives.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. But it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello? That's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
So, talk about the issue of racial profiling right here on Perspectives, and we are joined by Joyce Johnson, who is our political analyst who serves here at Perspectives many years, and we've been glad to have her coming back and forth, sharing a little bit about a variety of different topics. But today we talk about racial profiling and how do we deal with this. I want to talk about galvanizing the masses. When you look at the Me Too movement, right?
Yes.
You look at the Me Too movement, and the Me Too movement grabbed a lot of it.
Exactly.
I look at the Women's March, on March.
That's right.
My dear sister Tamika Mallory really spearheaded it and really raised her voice for that, along with a lot of other
Parkland. The assault weapons ban and.
Right.
Gun control.
We hear about Black Lives Matter, but I want to move beyond Black Lives Matter because they're doing their job, if you will. They're speaking and they're saying and they're raising their voice, but there's so many other organizations that have not collectively, I think, used their voice to really bring light to this matter.
I agree. I couldn't agree with you more. And you're being polite and meeting in Black America. I mean, we have fraternities and sororities, the Divine Nine. We've got local NAACP, national NAACP branches all over the countries. We've got tremendous faith institutions, our churches, which are the Christian Muslims and all of this, which are the bedrock of many much community organizing and good work. We've got social organizations like the Links. I mean, in Black America, we have created that strata of wealth, influence, and all of that. I mean, it goes from A to Z. And so we are not using that, and I don't know why. And that's the missing piece, the missing link. And really, if, I don't know the outreach here, but I'm going to call to task that group, my group. I'm a churchgoer. I'm a member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority. I belong to the NAACP. And so in all of these things, that was the beginning way in the 60s. So I don't know how, I don't know the catalyst, but I don't think we need a catalyst. Well, why need a catalyst in the face of things that are coming down the pike before it becomes critical? No. So you're right. I hope people watch this all around the country. If I had a tape of this, I'd put it up on Facebook, because I'm calling to task our leadership, our organizations, members. They get our money. We do some good work, but these are critical times when we need to do much more.
Policy.
And no excusing.
I want to talk about policy for a minute, because a lot of people sometimes focus on the protest, and not enough sometimes, I feel, on the policy.
Exactly.
Give us a little bit about that particular initiative, the policy initiative, because it's not just enough to ask these people to be, fired, criminally prosecuted.
Right.
There also has to be a challenging and a changing of policy if anything is ever going to change.
Indeed. And so, we had the blanket of the U.S. Department of Justice, whatever, but we don't have that now. So it's local. So we have to, where these incidents have taken place, there are council members, there are mayors, there are town councils to go who all supervise the local police as far as training, who can also say, if I were in my hometown of Poughkeepsie, New York, in fact, I'm going to mention this to my local council member here. If you report, if you use your racial attitudes to use the resources of the police just nilly-willy, then that's going to be a consequences to you in terms of law enforcement. Right. I said, for me, I would say a misdemeanor charge. In addition to that, there should be laws passed now that says you can't do this because there's the resources and it's wrong. Not based on race. If you just, not based on nilly-willy, superficial, your attitudes of who should and should not be on your block, on your golf course, in your Starbucks, or whatever. So that's all local. So, but that's incumbent upon us. All things, what's the famous line in politics? All politics local. All politics local. So that's us going to say the law must be changed. There must be consequences. The police cannot, must use greater discretion. And when they find this, warn the person who has done it or take them into custody for filing a false claim with no merit.
I remember in Atlanta, Georgia, and down in Atlanta, there's an ordinance that if you have a domestic dispute and the police are called, somebody's got to go to jail.
That's right.
And so
that
makes a big issue for somebody before they think about calling on the other.
Exactly.
Somebody's going to go if that's going to be the case.
Exactly.
And I think somewhere along the line, these laws have to somewhat be enacted here to say if you're making false claims with the same kind of consequence, if you're making false claims and we have to come out to a domestic dispute.
That's my point.
And it's a false, then somebody needs to be. And I know the argument will be, well, we're going to be scared, and people won't hesitate, will not call who really need to call. But we're looking right now, and people who don't need to be called are being called upon.
I know when a sensible person knows when a crime is the potential. But if you're going back to the guys at the Starbucks, the other folks are sitting there, whites are sitting there, the same thing. The guys who said, I went into the bathroom, no problem. I go, because everybody hangs out in Starbucks. But everybody hangs out.
About to go there myself.
Same here. Now that the guy's done the right thing. But all of that. So, there's a sensibility. So, not everybody's a fool. We all have good sense. And there's not an incident of late that in the common whatever to anybody makes sense. Why? Because we're all talking about it doesn't make sense. And not just black folks. Everybody's talking about it like this is crazy. But we've got to get to the point of beyond that and make it consequential to the person who is doing this. And that will send a signal. You run your mouth, you may not like blacks being here or there, but if you're going to call the cops for no good reason, you're going to jail. The consequences to you, period.
Joyce Johnson, that's why we bring you in.
That's why it's a pleasure.
Good to have you. Racial profile the topic of conversation here on Perspectives. And yes, it's always important to share our perspective here. And when we talk about racial profiling, some people say it really doesn't matter, it doesn't happen. But it's in the smallest of ways. When you're walking around a store and somebody's walking behind you, you never, you don't know what that feeling is like. And sometimes people don't know what it's like to be stopped by the police, because you have never had that experience.
That's
but for those
exactly
people
right.
who've had the experience,
That's exactly right.
It's a scary one, it's a haunting one. Yours truly has even had it recently, where they stopped you and said there was a warrant attached to my license plate, only to find out later on that there was no warrant, and all they wanted to do was just get close enough to do what they wanted to do, which was harass. And so it happens on a day-to-day basis. But we need to continue to raise our voice. We need to continue to let people know what's going on. And we need to make people aware that profiling is wrong, and don't stop until change occurs. For all of us here on the Set of Perspectives, I'm Daren Jaime saying take care. Share your perspective with somebody else. It just might make a difference in somebody else's life. Be good.
In your case, I would have gone.
Entertainment, he rocks it. Politics, he locks it. The host with the most would handle any topic. Don't forget to share your perspective with shines of light, because it might make a difference in someone else's life.
Make a difference.
What's your perspective?
Express what's in your heart and your mind. Share your perspective.